It was a line she'd rehearsed in the mirror. I stood there with one hand midair, hovering over the curve of her shoulder. And in that moment, I realized I hadn't touched my wife in 47 days. Not accidentally brushing fingers. Not a knee against hers on the couch. Not even a sleepy half-hour hug in the dark. Nothing. 47 days. She was wearing the navy hoodie I bought her last Christmas. Her hair was wet. There was a smell of someone else's cologne on her. IT wasn't mine. I took a step back, not because I was angry, but because I suddenly felt like I was trespassing, like I'd walked into a stranger's house by mistake. The walls were still the same beige. The kitchen tile still chipped. The living room still had the same oil stain from when I spilled pad thai 3 years ago. But the woman in front of me, no, this wasn't the same person who once fell asleep in my lap watching nature documentaries. She turned around like nothing had happened and opened the fridge. "We're out of oat milk," she said. "Can you grab some tomorrow?" I didn't respond because that's when I noticed her phone screen light up on the counter. A message preview. "Still thinking about this morning. You're unreal." No name, just a heart emoji. She didn't see me read it. She didn't even notice I was still standing there. I walked out the front door without saying anything, just walked past the mailbox I painted for her birthday. Past the car. She told me not to park too close to the hedge. I walked until my legs burned and my throat tightened. That night, I slept in the guest room. She didn't ask why. The next morning, she posted a photo of her coffee on Instagram with the caption, "New Beginnings." I hadn't left yet, but she had. That was the day I stopped waiting for her to come back and started preparing her ending. Because if she thought, "Don't touch me right now," was a boundary, she had no idea what I was capable of once I stopped begging to be loved. She didn't knock on the guest room door that night. I waited like a fool. I listened for footsteps, for the soft creak of the hallway floor, for any sign that she cared I wasn't beside her. Nothing, just silence, heavy and humiliating. At 2:14 a.m., I opened my phone and scrolled up through our old texts before everything turned robotic. Her "I love you" back then were unprovoked. Now they didn't come at all. I still remember one message from 2 years ago that said, "You make the world less sharp." That version of her had disappeared, and whoever remained was sharper than ever, razor sharp, cold, and surgical, like everything was being dissected without anesthesia, and I was the experiment. The next morning, she hummed in the kitchen. Actually hummed a pup song, cheerful. I sat on the edge of the guest bed listening, wondering if I'd dreamt the night before. But then I heard her phone vibrate. Not once, not twice, 5 times. I counted. She was laughing on the call by the 3rd ring. Quietly, but laughing. Not like when we used to laugh over dumb rom-coms or our failed attempt at salsa dancing. This laugh was different, careless, like someone had reached in and twisted something sacred. And that's when it stopped being about jealousy. It became about truth. I didn't confront her. That would have made me just another obstacle in her day. Instead, I started documenting. I saved screenshots, took photos of the screen when her phone lit up, synced her calendar to my tablet when she wasn't looking. I didn't know what I was looking for yet, but I knew I needed proof. Not for the courts, not even for friends. I needed myself to believe that I wasn't crazy. The next Friday, she told me she was going to an art class downtown. Said it was a 3-hour workshop on watercolor technique. I offered to drive her. She smiled too sweetly and said, "No need, babe. You'd be bored out of your mind." Babe, a word she hadn't used on me in months. It landed like acid. So I followed her. I waited 30 minutes after she left, then took my car, kept a safe distance, tracked her down through traffic until she pulled into the side parking lot of a boutique hotel called the White Fern. I watched from across the street as she got out. She wasn't carrying paint supplies. She was carrying lingerie. I recognized the little red bag from the boutique she used to avoid because it was too flashy. A man in a charcoal blazer opened the door for her before she could even knock. He didn't look like someone she'd met last week. He looked like someone who already knew the color of her bedroom walls. I didn't go in. I didn't make a scene. I just took the photo. One single photo of them together at the door. Her smiling like she hadn't smiled at me in 2 years. That image would stay burned in my skull, but also saved to 3 cloud accounts just in case I ever doubted my memory or needed to prove I wasn't the insane one. When she came home later that night, her hair still damp, she looked at me sitting at the dining table like I was a misplaced decoration. "How was your class?" I asked without raising my voice. "IT was expressive," she said, putting her phone down carefully. "We painted roses." I looked her straight in the eyes and replied, "Funny. You came back without your paintbrush." For a second, I thought her expression cracked. Just a second. Then she smirked, turned away, and said, "You're reading into things again." I didn't respond. I simply stood up, grabbed my jacket, and walked out. Not forever. Just long enough to make her think maybe I was done trying. The next day, she cried. Not in front of me, of course not. But I saw it in the security footage I forgot to tell her I had installed outside the house 2 weeks earlier. She was standing on the porch, staring out at the driveway, wiping her eyes like someone who realized a foundation was crumbling. She had no idea that IT wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. Because if I couldn't have the truth, I was going to force her to confront it herself, piece by piece. And when I was done, she wouldn't be humming anymore. I didn't confront her after the hotel photo. That would have been the instinctive thing to do. Slap the truth down on the table and ask for an explanation. But I wasn't interested in explanations anymore. I wanted her to reveal it herself. I wanted to watch her unravel, not out of cruelty, but because after years of shrinking myself to fit her expectations, I needed to watch what happened when I stopped holding everything together. So I began a game, silent, precise, controlled, and she didn't even know she was playing. The first thing I did was cancel the automatic grocery orders. It was small, almost invisible, but she noticed it by day 3 when she opened the fridge and asked, "Did you forget the Instacart order?" I shrugged. Probably. That night, she ate dry cereal and said nothing. One crack. Then I stopped replying to her texts. Nothing dramatic, just delayed hours, sometimes all day. I was always polite, never cold. "Sorry, had a busy afternoon. Didn't see your message until now." She started asking, "Is everything okay?" And I would respond with something vague like "just tired." But the real shift happened when I stopped asking her anything. "No, how was your day?" "No, what do you want for dinner?" I became a mirror, reflecting whatever energy she gave me. And when she realized the spotlight was no longer on her, she started flickering, desperate for a reaction. She made an effort again. Wear lipstick to the dinner table, watch documentaries with me on the couch, even though she scrolled through her phone the whole time. She even suggested we take a weekend road trip to reconnect, she said. That's when I knew she could feel it. That distant vacuum of me stepping out of the role of the emotionally available husband, the one who forgave, who asked, who tried. The version of me that buffered her guilt. He was gone. And without him, she didn't know who she was. But the best move was the one she never saw coming. I printed the photo of her and the man at the hotel, not digitally. I had it developed, printed in matte, and slid it inside a blank birthday card. No message, just the image. Then I waited for the perfect moment. It came a week later when she told me she was going to a coworker's baby shower. She dressed up, wore perfume she hadn't touched in months, and left in a rush. I placed the envelope in her makeup drawer. Second layer down, not hidden, just enough out of sight that she'd find it when she was alone getting ready or reapplying her mascara somewhere private. I didn't want the confrontation. I wanted to wait. That same day, I packed a bag and drove 3 hours north to my cousin Warren's cabin. I didn't leave a note, didn't turn off my phone. I simply became unreachable. I wanted her to sit with it. Sit with that image of herself walking into a hotel room with a man whose name I never needed to know. I turned my phone off once I arrived at the cabin. I brought no laptop, no distractions, just logs to burn and silence to think. For 2 full days, I existed off the grid, letting her spiral. I imagined her tearing through the house, checking voicemail, maybe even calling my coworkers. I imagined the moment she found the envelope, opened it, and saw herself in it. Not a selfie, not something she could filter or explain away, but raw proof. When I turned my phone back on, there were 12 missed calls, 6 messages. The first 4 were mild. Hey, just checking in. Where are you? Then came, did you go through my things? And finally, a simple one. Please call me. I didn't respond. I wasn't ready yet. The next day, I came home like nothing happened. She was standing in the doorway barefoot, looking like she hadn't slept. Her eyes were rimmed in red, but she didn't cry in front of me. She never did. Why would you leave that photo like that? She asked, her voice thin. I walked past her, hung out my coat, and said, You always told me you hated surprises. I figured this one wouldn't disappoint. She followed me into the kitchen, asking questions I didn't answer. How long have you known? Did you follow me? Are you going to tell anyone? Her voice was quick, strained, afraid not of me, but of what might come next. I didn't yell, didn't accuse. I simply replied, There's nothing to tell. You already lived it. And then I poured myself a glass of water and left her standing there. Because the unraveling had only just begun. That night, she tried to reclaim control. It was subtle at first. She cooked dinner, something she rarely did anymore, and set the table for 2 like nothing had happened. Chicken marsala, candlelight, cloth napkins. I watched her light the wick with trembling hands and sit down opposite me like this was some twisted date night, like the ghost of our old life could be summoned if she just performed the routine well enough. I didn't speak. I ate slowly, deliberately. Every bite was mechanical, like I was chewing through drywall. Halfway through she said, So you've known for a while. IT wasn't a question, but an admission. She was testing me, waiting to see how deep the knife had gone. I set my fork down and looked at her. Since the first time you told me you were tired, but your hair was freshly washed and your phone was dead silent. She flinched, not dramatically, but just enough for me to notice the crack in her mask. She nodded slowly, pushed food around her plate, and then whispered something that I honestly think she hadn't planned to say out loud. I thought I could control it, that it would stay small. She couldn't even call it what it was. Not a mistake, not infidelity, just it. As if naming it would make it real. But I didn't respond. I had no interest in helping her confess. I wasn't her priest. Later that evening, I found her sitting on the floor in our walk-in closet, knees pulled to her chest, staring at the shoebox where she kept old letters from me. Letters I hadn't seen in years. She didn't touch them, just stared at the box like it was holding some ancient version of herself she lost the password to. I never wanted this to become war, she said suddenly. I didn't think it would hurt you this way. That was the moment. The moment I realized she had convinced herself that what she did wasn't violent. That stepping out of the marriage, lying, sleeping with someone else, and pretending to still love me, IT was all forgivable because she hadn't thrown plates or screamed. She believed because she had been quiet about it. IT didn't count as cruelty. So I asked her, When did you stop believing I mattered? Her head snapped up. That's not fair. No, I said, folding my arms. You think I didn't notice when you stopped asking me how I slept when you left the room every time I tried to talk about anything that wasn't your life? I didn't stop caring, Then why'd you give yourself to someone else like I was a roommate with a mortgage? Silence. And then finally, she whispered because I wanted to feel wanted. I too didn't surprise me. What surprised me was how little it hurt to hear. The next morning, I found her car keys still on the hallway shelf. She hadn't left. She hadn't gone to work. Instead, she sat on the back porch in the same hoodie from the night before, drinking coffee and staring at the yard like it had answers. She didn't notice I was watching her through the blinds. That's when I made the second move. I contacted the leasing office for the apartment complex across town. 1-bedroom unit, corner floor, no shared walls. I didn't even ask to see the place. I wired the deposit and signed the agreement under my middle name, quietly without ceremony. That same afternoon, I packed a single suitcase, just the essentials. I left the rest. The shirts she never folded. The shoes she used to tease me for keeping too long. I left the wedding photo on the hallway wall untouched. I didn't even flip it down. I too didn't deserve the drama. I didn't leave a note this time either. Just one thing, a small envelope placed on her pillow. Inside was a printed screenshot of a bank transfer half of the joint savings down to the cent with a message beneath it. This is what fairness looks like. I walked out of the house without making a sound. No slamming doors, no dramatic music, just the clicking of the handle and the soft hush of goodbye. And I swear to you, as I pulled out of the driveway, I didn't feel like I was leaving home. I felt like I was finally stepping into it. When I left the house, I didn't expect silence. I thought there would be texts, calls, maybe even a voicemail with carefully chosen words like regret or mistake. But the first 48 hours were nothing. No contact, no notification, just the low hum of solitude in that small corner apartment with beige walls, a leaky faucet, and no memories baked into it yet. And that was the strange part. Peace didn't feel like relief at first. It felt like shock, like after a car crash where you're walking around untouched, but your brain hasn't caught up with your body. I kept expecting her to come through the door, still wearing that oversized hoodie, still smelling like whatever cologne wasn't mine. But she never did. And I realized something. Darla, yeah, I'll use her name now, wasn't looking for me. She was waiting to see if I would come crawling back. She'd mistaken silence for hesitation. What she didn't know was that I wasn't deciding. I was watching. 2 days after I left, she finally reached out. Not a message, not a call. She posted a photo of her in the backyard barefoot, wind catching her hair just enough to make it look cinematic. Caption, still standing. I stared at that post for a long time. It had 12 likes, one comment from someone named Ames Manning 89. You always were. I clicked the name. Private profile, but the profile picture was familiar. The charcoal blazer, the hotel doorway, the same man who had held that red boutique bag for her. I'd captured him on my phone weeks ago, frozen in that one damning image. And now he was commenting openly under her posts as if he'd won something. What disturbed me wasn't the comment. It was that she left it up visible, untouched. She was testing me, or worse, she didn't care. I didn't react. I let it sit. But I started planning again. I knew she'd check the bank activity, knew she'd see the split and wonder where my half went. So I opened a new account, moved it immediately, then sent one final transfer to a name she hadn't seen in years. My sister, the one Darla always said was too dramatic and judgmental. Funny how judgmental people turn out to be useful when you're dealing with liars. What Darla didn't know is that my sister had been watching everything from the sidelines. And she was angry, not for me, but for the years she'd spent biting her tongue while watching her brother be slowly erased by someone who performed affection like a script. I gave her access to the old hard drive I backed up, the one with screenshots, GPS records, emails I recovered from the trash bin before Darla wiped them clean. And then I waited because Darla wasn't just careless. She was arrogant. The next night at 2:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. One message, no greeting. What did you do? That was it. No context, no punctuation, no signature. I smiled when I read it because I hadn't done anything. Not yet, but someone else had. My sister had posted a thread, anonymous but piercing, a long-form post on a popular relationship forum titled, "When You Discover Your Sister-in-Law's Affair," and she still plays the victim. She didn't name Darla. She didn't need to. The story was detailed. The pattern familiar, the hotel, the boutique, the art class, the man who wore a blazer in June, and the husband who finally stopped apologizing for breathing. Within hours, the comments poured in. People asking who it was, others speculating, screenshotting, comparing. Someone even matched a blurry background in one of Darla's Instagram posts to the exact room number at the White Fern Hotel. By noon the next day, Darla's social media was gone, vanished, wiped, just like her excuses. She called me once that afternoon. I let it ring. Then she texted, "You said you wouldn't go nuclear." I replied simply, "I didn't. You did that yourself. I just stopped shielding you from the blast." She didn't answer. And I knew then that she finally understood. This wasn't revenge. This was exposure. I hadn't screamed. I hadn't hit or humiliated. I just let the truth walk free. And now that it had a voice, IT wasn't going back in the box. The first time she knocked on the door of my apartment, I didn't open it. Not because I was afraid or bitter or trying to prove some petty point. I didn't open it because I wanted her to feel for just 1 minute what it was like to be on the outside of something she used to own. She stood there for almost 15 minutes, according to the camera I'd installed above the door. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She just stood frozen. A silhouette of someone who had finally realized the silence meant something permanent. She didn't return the next day, but the world returned to her. Screenshots of the thread had made their way to people we both knew. Quiet coworkers, distant family. Even her Pilates instructor sent me a message that just said, "I'm sorry. I should have said something months ago." That went harder than it should have. Not because I needed confirmation, but because it meant people had seen it happening and assumed I either knew or didn't want to know. That's the thing no one tells you about being betrayed. It's not just the person who lies to you that hurts. It's all the people who watch them do it. The silence of witnesses can feel louder than the crying. But I didn't react. I didn't post. I didn't reply. I let Darla spiral in the vacuum she created because every move she made now is visible. I'd stopped shielding her, and it turned out without my silence to protect her reputation, the cracks were all anyone could see. 3 days after the thread exploded, she called again. I answered this time. Her voice was flat, like someone talking through a wall of smoke. "You think this makes you look strong?" I didn't respond immediately. I let the question linger. Then I said, "No, I think it makes me look honest." She scoffed, but it sounded hollow. "Do you know how much I've lost in a week?" "You mean attention?" That landed. She went quiet for a moment. I thought she hung up, but then she said, slower this time, "You're acting like you never made mistakes." And I think that's the part one remember most about that conversation. Not the defensiveness, not the failed accusations, just that line. "You're acting like you never made mistakes." As if her betrayal had been some counterbalance to imagined sins I'd never committed. I asked her, "What exactly did I do wrong, Darla? Did I forget to change the oil on your car? Did I not notice your new haircut fast enough? Did I love you too quietly while you ran out of reasons to respect me?" No answer. I continued, because if you're looking for justification, you're going to need to invent a better story than "you didn't inspire me anymore." The silence after that wasn't uncomfortable. It was clean, surgical. And then she said something that surprised me. "I want to go to counseling just to understand what went wrong." I didn't laugh. I didn't yell. I just replied, "I already understand." She asked what I meant, and I told her the truth. That some people don't cheat because they're unhappy. Some cheat because they can't handle being loved without chaos. That she needed friction to feel real. And when I gave her peace, she turned it into emptiness. You didn't love me wrong, she whispered. You just loved me in a way I couldn't return. And there it was. The most honest thing she'd said in 3 years. I ended the call with no bitterness, no dramatic farewell, just a simple, please don't come here again. There's nothing left to recover. But she did come again, just not to see me. She showed up at my sister's place that weekend. My sister called me livid, saying Darla had knocked on her door and asked to clear the air. My sister told her to clear the sidewalk instead. And when Darla didn't move, she handed her a sealed envelope. I had no idea what was in it until later that night. It was a printout of a group chat I hadn't seen before. It included several of Darla's friends, one of whom had decided finally to send it to US. The messages were dated from months ago. Screenshots of her bragging about how checked out I was, joking about the hotel weekends, laughing about how she could train him to disappear without a fight. That one made my hands shake. Not from sadness, from vindication. Because you can question memories. You can even question motives. But screenshots, they're gospel. I stared at the line about me disappearing without a fight and said aloud to no one, you were right about one thing. I did disappear. But the fight, that part was just getting started. I didn't expect her to show up at my office. Not after the screenshots, not after everything, but she did. Dressed in black like she was attending the funeral of a version of herself that never truly lived. She didn't ask to speak to me. She just waited by the elevator, arms crossed, as if hoping I'd come down and magically unsee everything she'd done. My coworker Phil came into my office and said, "There's a woman downstairs. She won't leave unless you talk to her." I didn't respond. I stared at the window for a full minute. Then I stood up, walked to the break room, poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, and sat back down. 10 minutes later, she left. That night, she texted me, please, 5 minutes. Just 5. I ignored it. I wasn't trying to punish her. I wasn't playing some game. I simply had nothing left to give. Whatever love I had stored for her had burned itself out somewhere between the hotel receipt and the line about training me to disappear. And now she was just someone I used to know the middle name of. But the next message, that one I couldn't ignore. I'm not with him anymore. I stared at it. Not because it changed anything, but because I realized what she was trying to do. She thought this was about him. Like, if she cut off the affair partner, the bridge to the past would magically be rebuilt. So, I replied with the only thing I could say that still carried weight. I wasn't destroyed because of who you slept with, Darla. I was destroyed because of how easily you watched me fall apart and said nothing. She didn't text again that night, but she posted the next morning. An old photo of US taken 3 years ago at a lake in Montana. I was holding a fish I didn't catch. She was laughing in the background. The caption said, "There are things I can't fix, but I'll never forget the quiet way he held everything together." That post got over 200 likes, including one from her ex-affair partner. It was almost poetic. She was trying to repaint the past in public shades of nostalgia, as if that could soften the truth. But nostalgia without accountability is just manipulation in prettier clothes. A week later, she sent me a certified letter. Inside was a typed page. No heading, no signature, just a single line. I didn't expect to break you. I thought you were unshakable. And I think that's when it finally sank in what this had really been to her. An experiment. She didn't cheat out of passion or longing or some whirlwind mistake. She did it to test the limits of my love. And when I didn't collapse the way she expected, when I rebuilt myself in silence, she didn't know how to grieve what she'd broken. Because she never wanted to lose me. She just wanted to see how far I could bend before I shattered. but I never shattered. I vanished. Quietly, entirely, without fireworks, without warnings, just gone. And now she was the one walking through the ashes of something she thought would never catch fire. A few days later, I got another letter, this time from a lawyer. She'd formally submitted for divorce. No dramatic scene, no pleading, just paperwork. Neatly folded, clean. She signed it with her full name, not Mrs. Merritt, just Darla Helbridge, her maiden name, like I never happened. I signed the papers, drove them to the post office myself, mailed them with no return address. I didn't need her to know where I was. She already knew what I'd become. The man who stayed loyal longer than she deserved. The man who left quieter than she expected. And the man who, in the end, didn't just walk away. He disappeared through every door she thought she locked shut. It's been 6 months since I last saw her. Not in person, not online, not by accident, just nothing. She disappeared from my radar the same way I disappeared from hers all those years ago when she stopped seeing me as a person and started seeing me as furniture. Background noise, something steady she never had to earn. And that's the strangest part of it all. I don't hate her. I thought I would. I thought I'd carry this bitterness like a second spine, but it never came. Not even when I found out she moved to another state. Not even when a mutual friend told me she started seeing someone new, quietly this time. No posts, no drama. She finally learned the cost of being careless with someone's soul. But by then, I had already healed more than I expected, because something changed in me after I signed those papers. Not dramatically, not like in the movies. There was no euphoric moment, just a slow, quiet return to myself. The self I hadn't seen in years. The man who used to laugh without waiting for permission. The man who made pancakes at midnight just because the craving hit. The man who used to paint in the garage even though he wasn't any good at it. I started painting again. Bad landscapes, mostly sunsets that looked like melted sherbet. Trees with too many branches. But I loved it. It reminded me that doing something purely for joy is an act of rebellion in a world that teaches us to measure everything. I made new friends. Not the kind who ask what happened, but the kind who ask what's next. One of them, her name's Mallory, runs the bookstore near my new place. I met her when she caught me rearranging all the books by color instead of genre. She didn't get annoyed. She laughed and said, I do that when I'm avoiding something, too. We started talking, then walking, then sharing things we didn't even know we still remembered. I told her about the divorce on the second week. I didn't want to pretend I was anything other than exactly what I was, someone healing. She didn't flinch. She just nodded and said, You don't look broken. You look rebuilt. That line stayed with me because for the first time in a long time, I did feel rebuilt. Not glued together. Not patched, just whole. Differently shaped, but whole. Last weekend, I visited that same lake in Montana where Darla and I once took that photo. Not for nostalgia, just because I needed to prove to myself that I could return to the scene without carrying the weight of her with me. And I did. I stood there on the dock, same spot, same breeze. But this time, I wasn't holding a fish I didn't catch. I was holding a small canvas in my hand that I painted the night before. Nothing fancy, just the lake and the trees and a man standing on the edge of it, not waiting, just being. I left the painting on a bench nearby with a note taped to the back. Who you used to be is not a prison. You can walk out whenever you're ready. I don't know who found it. Maybe someone who needed it. All I know is this. I didn't need closure from her because I gave it to myself. And that was the most peaceful goodbye I've ever had.